In a region precious short of good news, there was a collective sense of joy today as the remaining hostages were transported out of Gaza and hundreds of Palestinians were freed in exchange. Families who have lived in anguished limbo for more than 2 years were reunited with loved ones. The guns, for now at least, are silent. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Porrick O'Brien, reports.
This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East.
The jury's out on that, and the jury may be our grandchildren. But on Highway 4 southbound this morning, signposts to this day's significance. Thousands gathered at the Nova Music Festival site. Thousands more outside the reunite military base, where hostages from Gaza would be brought first. Same time, just a few miles away, inside Gaza, Hamas hand over 7 of the 20 living hostages to the Red Cross, this time without the pageantry and show of military force of previous releases. Then handed over to the IDF and brought to the reunite military base.
Remember, the men in these vans have been kept in Gaza in captivity for the last 2 years. God knows what they've seen and what they've experienced. And now they're looking out the windows of these vans. They're seeing their friends, they're seeing their neighbors for the first time.
Inside the base, their families were waiting. Guy Bilbao Dalal was taken hostage at the Nova Festival. Hamas had made him watch videos of previous releases of others, now experiencing his own. His sister spoke for everyone. Then from the reunions in the military base, flown to Tel Aviv.
So the first group of hostages is leaving the military base now. They were able to walk onto the helicopter, so that's a good sign for their health. They'll be brought to 2 hospitals in Tel Aviv. And we also understand that just now, the other group of hostages is being handed over to the IDF, is on Israeli soil, will be coming around this road any moment now.
And in the crowd, a nation's trauma channeled.
I can't tell you, it's such a relief after 2 years that we're waiting for this moment. I can't explain the feeling. It's like part of our soul has come back and we couldn't live without it. Now we can start breathing again.
The heart is expanding so far. I mean, we can breathe now, we can get back to our community and live again.
Before the second group of hostages arrived here, news came through that Air Force One had touched down in Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv. After meeting hostages' families, he addressed the Knesset.
Virtually the entire region has endorsed the plan that Gaza will be immediately demilitarized, that Hamas will be disarmed, and Israel's security will no longer be threatened in any way, shape, or form.
At one point, the speech was interrupted. A lawmaker with a recognized Palestine sign ejected. This was one of only 2 references to Palestine in the Knesset today. This was the other one.
But now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over.
Donald Trump made this happen. Benjamin Netanyahu was making electoral hay before the glaring heat of elections next year.
Mr. President, you are committed to this peace. I am committed to this peace. And together, Mr. President, we will achieve this peace.
Earlier, the second group of 13 hostages had been released. Back at the military base, Matan Zangoker met his mum. His girlfriend Alana had also been taken hostage, freed during a previous release. His mother Einav, the face of the hostages' families campaign. Once all the living Israeli hostages were back, the exchange of Palestinian prisoners and detainees began. Busloads leave Katziot prison in southern Israel. Over 1,700 Gazans, including 22 minors, due to be released. Some arrived in Khan Yunis in the centre of the Strip, a devastated place, still with the energy to embrace its own. On the West Bank, some of the 250 prisoners on the agreed list arrived in Ramallah, others due to be deported. Many of these men serving life sentences handed down by Israeli courts for killing Israeli civilians. Samer Halabia has spent 10 years in prison, sentenced to 32 for attempted murder, a conviction he contests.
It's an indescribable feeling. I can still not believe it. We used to wait for this joy to happen. We faced extreme psychological pressure, and I couldn't believe it until the last second.
Away from the big crowds and signature national moments, a living room in kibbutz near Yitzhak. The body of Ella Chaimi's husband, Tal, is still inside Gaza. Only 4 of the 28 deceased hostages were released today. Tal's body was not one of them. How is she feeling watching the hostages returning home today?
Jealous and glad, happiness, and I'm worried. Also, I'm worried because I'm afraid that I'm worried first because I know that Tal, when he will come back, so we will come back to a funeral, and maybe he will not come back.
Ella was 3 months pregnant when her husband was killed. Lotan is 1. Never knew his father in person. This family will have to wait for their new dawn.
And Porrick is with me now.
Krish, this is a country celebrating tonight, and of course they are. They deserve every second of this, a massive sort of intake of breath as those hostages were released today. But I was talking to some Israeli journalist friends of mine today, and they were telling me that there was virtually zero coverage in the Israeli press of what was happening in Gaza. Thousands of people returning to destruction and devastation. I say that not to make a sort of inside baseball point, but I think it does speak to how these two societies see each other. And just another thought, I was watching Trump and Netanyahu in the Knesset, this sort of bombastic bromance we saw on full display. Very similar leaders, very similar styles, humility, self-reflection, not a particularly major setting in either of them. But I think it is worth saying that this war could have been ended earlier, and thousands of lives could have been saved if that had happened.
Porrick O'Brien. Well, Daniel Lifshitz's grandparents were kidnapped from their kibbutz on October 7th. His grandmother, Yosheved Lifshitz, was released in 2023, but his grandfather, Oded Lifshitz, was killed in captivity. I spoke to Daniel earlier in Hostages Square and began by asking him how he now feels.
I don't feel anything about sadness today. It's a lot of joy, and I mean, seeing all these 20 hostages, they seems better than we could expect, and I'm happy they all seems like they walk on their feet.
Yes, I mean, the Hostage Families Forum have put out a statement condemning the fact that for 24 families, the bodies are not coming home now. They say this is a breach of the agreement, and they actually say Israel should suspend cooperation with the agreement. I mean, do you think that as well?
It's a tough question. It's a tough question to get into what to do now, you know? So I hope they will, we have to push Hamas to release everyone they had.
So do you think 4 is so few that there is something going on? This is not honest dealing?
Honest is absolutely not. That's for sure. But as well, it's a dream come true what President Trump succeeded to do here. He made the impossible possible. And I was like, I knew everything going on, or most of the thing going on, and I was like shocked.
You talked about people getting closure, or not getting closure because the bodies aren't back. Could you give me some insight into what closure really means?
When your family member is being kidnapped by the worst terror organization exists in this world, it's like someone kind of kidnapped his soul, took it, and the minimum, is that we get him back and we can heal. So with my grandfather, we had a closure. The rest have a feeling that I don't know. So I cannot speak for them, but I know what the closure is.
A lot of people have been saying, we must make sure this can never happen again. I think, again, you have a unique insight into what that really means. What does that mean for you?
I think never again came as something we said about the Holocaust. And then something as October 7 happened, so that is a bit the never again of the state of Israel, you know. And for us is open the eyes always and not waiting for a terror organization to terrorize. I mean, when there is a terror organization, you have to treat it, eliminate it, look in the eyes, and do what you got to do with a terror organization on your borders.
Do you think it is possible for Israel to exist without that?
I think we will, about Gaza and the Palestinians, I think the answer is closer than ever to come. The Palestinians will have now a narrow windows of opportunity to choose peace over terror.
And just finally, I mean, as somebody who's been through the bereavement process, when this is over, and all the 24 bodies are back, do you think Israel is also going to have, you know, a sort of a collective post-traumatic stress to deal with?
It's the worst trauma this country had. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of people that are now suffering traumas that had to be treated. So this is an historical day. All the live hostages went back from Gaza. They can start to heal now. They can really start to treat themselves now.
Daniel, thank you very much, dude.
Thank you very much.
Well, in the last few minutes, 4 coffins carrying bodies of deceased hostages have been seen being escorted by Israeli police to a forensic institute in Tel Aviv, where they will be formally identified. The IDF said a short ceremony was held in their memory before they crossed the border. Hamas have said that they are the bodies of Yossi Sharabi, Guy Iloz, John Bifan and Daniel Peretz. There are 24 other families who are still waiting, who say the ceasefire plan has now been violated by Hamas. Now, as well as the jubilant scenes in the West Bank we saw earlier, where some of the high-security Palestinian prisoners were released, huge crowds gathered in Gaza to welcome back hundreds of detainees freed from Israeli jails under the ceasefire agreement. They had been held without charge or trial as unlawful combatants, a move widely criticised by human rights groups. There are distressing images in this report by our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Sakanda Kamani.
The relief and joy of freedom, too much to contain. Families reuniting with loved ones they feared they would never see again. Hundreds of detainees, clad in the grey tracksuits of the Israeli prison system, returning to Gaza. For Palestinians, these were hostages too. More than 1,700 detained by Israeli forces during their assault on Gaza, held in prisons without charge or trial. Many now talking of the torture they had to endure.
We had no food in the prisons. They starved us deliberately. Repression, beatings, humiliation, degradation, dogs, rubber bullets and gas. That was our daily routine.
Up until the last moments, Palestinian prisoners faced the harsh treatment of Israeli prison guards. Human rights groups have alleged torture and sexual abuse was widespread. Amongst the huge crowd welcoming the detainees back to Gaza, armed, masked men. Hamas very clearly still a presence here, but none of those being released were accused of involvement in October the 7th. Some were in clear need of medical attention. A number of teenage children and women were also amongst those freed.
God has blessed us and freed us from the hands of those wicked ones. We have suffered for 2 years, tortured, handshackled, eyes blindfolded. The situation was very hard. But today, God has given us a new life.
Amongst those still being held in the Israeli prison system, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, head of the Kamal Adwan Hospital, taken into custody by Israeli forces at the end of last year. Those who have been freed are returning to scenes of apocalyptic devastation and an increasingly fractious security situation. Released today, Naji al-Jafarawi. He's yet to discover his brother Saleh, a well-known citizen journalist, was killed yesterday, reportedly by armed members of the powerful Dogmush clan in Gaza City that's been clashing with Hamas fighters. Today, Hamas gunmen lined up and executed a group of men, including members of the Dogmush, that they accused of being Israeli collaborators. More horrors of many kinds may well lie ahead in Gaza. But for so many here in Khan Yunis, today was a moment to celebrate the end of a nightmare in captivity.
Well, joining me now is the Palestinian politician and activist Aida Touma-Suleiman. She's one of Israel's 2 million Palestinian citizens and a member of the parliament, the Knesset, for the left-wing Hadash coalition. Good evening. You didn't take up your right to be in the Knesset today for Trump's visit. What did you make of what happened there?
Yes, actually, I chose not to attend this festival full of chauvinist and militaristic approach. I thought that it was good to feel the celebration of people who are meeting their beloved outside the Knesset, but not to suffer from hearing the speeches that were in the Knesset. Trump actually gave a speech that tried to clean Netanyahu, who led a genocide for 2 years, who tried to present it to the Israelis and to the world as a peace maker and a peace lover, which is not accepted at all. All of us wanted to end the war, but it doesn't mean that we need to forgive for all the crimes committed during that war. I just heard in your report one of the families of the hostages saying that Trump did made the impossible possible. Trump proved what we said from day one, that the United States, the president of the United States, have the power to end the war, and they should have ended it. Today, Trump was proud of the fact that he actually fueled it with more and more weapons.
Right, but I mean, it may be true that he could have done this earlier, or that the previous president could have done it earlier, and that many lives could have been saved. But ultimately, he has moved people to this position. There is now a process. There is a conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. The Arab leaders are getting together. They are trying to put together a future, and a peaceful future, for Gaza. Surely that's something to be welcomed.
As I said before, Krishnan, we always would support any process that is really a political process that will lead to end the occupation, that will lead to a Palestinian state, that will unite the two parts of the Palestinian state, Gaza and the West Bank, and that will end the violence of the settlers in the West Bank. Nobody can guarantee all what I said through that process. We celebrate the fact that the genocide stopped, that the hostages are back, that this deal is going to be implemented in its first stage. But we cannot be not worried about how it's going to proceed, especially with the two speeches that we heard today from Netanyahu and from Trump.
I mean, they both
None
said that
of
they
them
had won,
mentioned
that
any
this
political
was an example of peace through strength. So what do you want to say to those leaders in Sharm el-Sheikh who are trying to get an immediate future for Gaza together now? What do they need to do?
Well, first of all, they need to be sure that the Palestinians have the right to run their own future. And they have the right to decide for their own future. And they have the capability also to have leaders to do that. Nobody needs to decide for them or to run for them any parts of their homeland. They don't need neither Tony Blair nor Trump to do it. The Palestinians can do it by themselves. They need all the support from the Arab world and from the world who watched the war and the destruction going on and did not stop it immediately. That's for sure. The Palestinians need that. They need also to take into consideration that Palestinians have the right for self-determination. It's not only a humanitarian issue. It's not only running to normalize with Israel as long as it is still occupying the Palestinian people. And the issue of the West Bank and what is going on the West Bank should be on the table too. There might be a need to ask for a ceasefire in the West Bank.
Right, and briefly, what's your message to Hamas, who have only handed over 4 of the bodies of the 28 that they promised to hand over by today? They are now in breach of the agreement.
Well, first of all, I think that Hamas has said from the beginning that they are committed to this agreement. Otherwise, the Israelis or Trump wouldn't have agreed to this agreement. Second, they offered that kind of agreement months ago. I think that everybody understands with the amount of destruction that is existing in Gaza, there might be obstacles to find all the hostages. I hope that all the hostages who are alive already, they are with their families. All those who are dead, their bodies will be delivered. Don't give any option for Netanyahu to restart the war again.
Aida Touma-Suleiman, thank you very much indeed. Well, earlier I spoke to Sharren Haskel, Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, and I asked her what it meant to her to get the surviving hostages back.
We've seen them coming back to the loving arms of their families. And it feels, to be honest, like Israel can finally start breathing again.
Now, the 24 families who have not got their loved ones back are understandably very upset. They say this is a breach of the agreement. I mean, when can they expect to get their loved ones back?
We're really hoping that within a few hours. This is a very difficult moment, and we need to be very careful with what we are saying.
Do you know whether all of those bodies have been found, or is it still a question of finding them?
Well, you know, this is very sensitive, especially when all the families are anxious and worried about their loved ones. And so the details of everything we keep, but we are doing every effort to make sure that they will be returned as quickly as possible, as agreed with.
Okay, now what did you make of the Trump speech? It was quite a remarkable performance, and he kind of made clear that he had to encourage, cajole, push the Prime Minister into ending what he said was the killing.
Well, I don't know how you would interpret that. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have a very special relationships. They're good friends.
But the pressure was clearly also on Mr. Netanyahu to end the killing. I mean, Trump didn't like it, did he?
Oh, come on. Okay, absolutely not. This plan has been worked on together in collaboration between Israel and between the American administrations for months now.
Right, so what do you hope will come out of the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh?
I think that when the entire international community, especially the Arab countries, including the Palestinian Authority, have accepted that deal, understanding that Hamas doesn't have a future role, not from a civilian point of view, not from a military point of view. I think this is a very important step in understanding that to create real coexistence, real peace, real stability, not just a slogan that in 5 or 10 years is going to be another round of war, but for that we need to work on the important issues as Trump outlined and do the important path in order to de-radicalize an entire population that's been indoctrinated for more than 20 years by Hamas, a terrorist death cult.
And finally, President Trump said on the plane that he was trying to get agreement on whether Tony Blair was an acceptable choice to lead the Board of Peace. To any of the Arab participants who are skeptical about him, what would you say?
Well, look, I think that until now, if we've accepted Trump's peace plan entirely, it's going to be very difficult to have a 100% consensus. If there's a majority for that, then we need to go with it. I think he's a very sensible person. He's got a lot of experience, especially in the international arena. And I think he can do a really good work.
Sharren Haskel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, as we've said, more than 20 world leaders have been meeting to discuss Gaza's future at an international summit in Egypt. Top of the agenda, how to implement the ceasefire, as well as the Herculean challenge of rebuilding a territory that's been so overwhelmingly damaged by 2 years of bombing. But beyond today's photo opportunities, there are few details on how that future might be sustained. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, reports.
And so on to the next leg of the peace tour. President Trump touched down in Sharm el-Sheikh this afternoon to meet what he had earlier described as the most powerful, the richest nations in the world, some incredible nations that made it all possible. His motorcade sped through the streets to a meeting with the Egyptian president. Others may be skeptical, but Mr. Trump has no doubts about the deal.
It's peace in the Middle East, and everybody said it's not possible to do. And it's going to happen, and it is happening. It's before your very eyes.
President Sisi's job was to smile and agree. And on to the leaders' parade, as if President Trump, rather than the Egyptians, was hosting the Peace 2025 summit. Some, like President Erdogan of Turkey, have been instrumental in the negotiations, as has the Emir of Qatar and the Saudi Foreign Minister. Indonesia may provide troops for a peacekeeping force. Enter the ghost of leaders past. Tony Blair is tipped to head some kind of technocratic administration for Gaza. The Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas was there, even though Israel says there's no role for him. It's not entirely clear what Viktor Orban of Hungary was doing there. And even more mystifying, Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, the International Football Federation. The aim of such a large summit is to show both Israel and Hamas that the whole world has a stake in this agreement. The details are yet to be worked out. And yes, all other Middle East peace deals have failed. But the Americans are trying to create momentum. Earlier, the Prime Minister, meeting the Emir of Qatar, offered British expertise.
We, the United Kingdom, stand ready to play our full part. In particular, we stand ready in relation to monitoring the ceasefire and decommissioning Hamas capability and weaponry. And that's drawing on our experience in Northern Ireland.
In February, President Trump shared a bizarre AI video of a futuristic Gaza, notably devoid of Gazans. He has since acknowledged that this was fantasy, but not that the future is defined by the past, and nowhere more so than in the Middle East. Today, channeling his inner John and Yoko, he seemed to be saying, give peace a chance.
It's so beautiful to see a new and beautiful day is rising, and now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part because the rest comes together. We all know how to rebuild, and we know how to build better than anybody in the world.
The Egyptian president was a little more specific about the rights of the Palestinians.
They too have the right to determine their destiny and look forward to a future free from the spectre of war. They also have the right to enjoy freedom and to live in their independent state, a state that lives side by side with Israel in peace, security and mutual recognition.
And so the signing, with neither Israel nor Hamas present, just the assertion that somehow hope will triumph over experience, and what happens next will not just be an absence of war, but the reality of peace.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer, who's been at the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, has just been giving his reaction. He called it an historic day and had this to say when asked if President Trump should be nominated for next year's Nobel Prize.
There'll be plenty of people, I'm sure, nominating him. I think the nominations are into the early part of next year. But I mean, what I do, in all seriousness, it is a historic day. And it is a real tribute to President Trump that he has got leaders to this position. This has been tried for many, many years, and stepping away from the personalities, this is a huge relief for hostages and their families, huge relief for civilians in Gaza, all of whom have been through unimaginable grief for 2 and a bit years now, and they are first and foremost in my mind, and that's what gives me the determination to follow through now and to take other leaders with us on this. That's the only thing I've been talking about today, not celebrating today as historic, which of course it is, but using the opportunity here with other leaders to say, how can we now, as a group of leaders, make sure that this is implemented in full, brings about the peace. We owe that to the Israelis and to the Palestinians, and I'm determined that the United Kingdom will play its full part.
Well, let's get the latest from our Washington US editor, Anushka Astana. Anushka.
So I think something really telling was what you heard in Lindsay's piece there, where the Egyptian foreign minister talked about the need to keep Trump engaged in this. And that is the big question. The hostages have been freed. Will America remain engaged? We've been told that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, those key players, have reassured the Hamas leadership that Donald Trump is committed to all 20 points of his peace plan. Do we think that he will follow that through? The difficulty in getting into the head of the president is that you see him make quite different comments at different times, even in the last 24 hours. Just look at that contrast in tone. On the plane over to the Middle East, speaking to journalists, really quite a measured tone, talking about the human cost of all of this. More than 60,000 people dead, not wanting to talk about the idea of a Gazan Riviera, instead saying we need to help people first. As you mentioned, talking about with Tony Blair in his role, having to check whether that was acceptable to different people. So a very considered tone that really did contrast with what we heard in the Knesset, in what felt like a very triumphant speech in which he gave his full backing to Israel on their military campaign, where he said to them, you've won, enjoy the fruits of your labour. And kind of extraordinary moment where he stood up and he asked the Israeli president to pardon Benjamin Netanyahu on corruption charges, saying cigars and champagne, who cares? When in fact we're talking about accusations around $200,000 of gifts. He also spoke, President Trump, about how pro-Israeli he had been, talking about that controversial decision to move the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and also recognising Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Now, you can argue that that pro-Israeli position took us to this point because he persuaded Netanyahu to sign up to all of this. But when one protester held up that recognised Palestine sign in the Knesset, they were immediately hurried out. And you have to ask, will President Trump go as far as much of the world wants him to?
Anushka Astana. Well, joining me now from Texas is Ambassador David Satterfield, who served as the US Special Envoy for Middle East humanitarian issues until April 2024. He's now director of the Baker Institute at Rice University. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk about the challenges of international diplomacy now. Now, unconfirmed reports this evening are saying that while Netanyahu said he didn't go to Sharm el-Sheikh because of the Jewish holiday. In fact, it was President Erdogan of Turkey who said that if Netanyahu lands, I'm not coming. That doesn't bode well for international diplomacy, does it?
Well, I think it certainly shows that while today was an extraordinarily important day, it's the day before, not the day after yet, with respect to a genuine peace. And that day after is going to take a great deal of work in Gaza, work in Israel, and work on a regional basis.
So, I mean, how can that be marshaled? I mean, is the Board of Peace, maybe run by Tony Blair, the right way to go about it?
Look, every contemplation of what you do in a day after has had several steps. Once you get the hostages released, which had to be the initial step, a ceasefire, humanitarian aid at scale coming in, all of which is either underway right now or will shortly build to sufficient volume. You've then got to have some form of interim stabilization force, which we always saw as primarily an Arab or Arab Muslim force. You need a transitional administration, and what has been outlined in the 20-point plan is very much along those lines, and then you will need reconstruction. So these are all critical steps, but let's outline here what hasn't happened and what Hamas wasted no time in declaring would not happen, that they would not disarm. So how do you get past this point? You get there through two different areas of focus that are absolutely essential. President Trump, who is the architect, and give him full credit for this, for what was achieved today, must remain focused on all of the difficult steps to come. He has to be seen by everyone, Hamas, the region, as personally invested in a success. The second focal point has to be the Arabs, or the regional parties. It's Turkey, it's the UAE, it's Qatar, it's Egypt, it's other critical states, the Saudis. They've got to remain laser-like focused on Hamas. If either party, President Trump or the regional parties, shift that focus, diminish it, you're not going to see much progress made.
Now, you mentioned the international force as first priority. You know, the hope, certainly in the Israeli government, is that the Indonesians will take the leading part there. What is the advantage of Indonesia as opposed to any of the others who are prepared to send troops?
I have no idea whether the Israeli government, quote, prefers the Indonesians, close quote, or not. We had always seen the critical parties in that force to be the UAE, Egypt, either in a participation or a command sense, with other Arab and Muslim forces joining. So putting that force together and doing it quickly, very quickly, is going to be critical, particularly given Hamas's overt challenge to the concept, first, of disarmament, secondly, of ceding practical authority on the ground. You need a counterforce in there, but you need something more. Force alone, stabilization force, kinetic force alone, won't resolve the issues created over the past, 20 years, since 2005 and Israel's withdrawal from Gaza. You're going to have a political vision. And that part of the plan, the 20-point plan, goes beyond the stabilization force into the beginnings of some transitional authority, which is Palestinian in character, as rapidly and comprehensively as possible.
Yeah, how do you ensure that the vision for the future of Gaza is Palestinian and not just a load of people from outside writing it for them?
Well, a load of people from outside are going to be essential at first because of the disastrous situation in Gaza and because of the role, the dominant role that Hamas wishes to be seen as playing. You're going to have external intervention, but that intervention has to be viewed as a preliminary to or preparatory for significant Palestinian administration and ultimately the actual role of a reformed Palestinian Authority. What are the guarantees there? Well, there are no guarantees, but the greatest assurances that you will get more rather than less progress made on this is going to be the participation of President Trump and the critical Arab and regional parties.
Ambassador Satterfield, thank you very much indeed.